Well, at 11 years old, 11 years old was 1976 for me, so let me think about this for a sec. Early 70s, I should say this, my sisters, who are older than me, had brought home Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath records. And I was familiar, they had Led Zeppelin 2, Led Zeppelin 3, but the one album that really had an impact on me in 1971, 1972 was Black Sabbath's Master of Reality, which, as anybody knows, is any of the first few Black Sabbath albums, any Black Sabbath album is great, but this one specifically was good, and I knew it was different than anything I had ever heard. Then you mix that in with some Led Zeppelin. So I was listening to that, and I had discovered two bands, probably about 1976 or so. One of them was AEROSMITH, and the other one was, actually it was Boston First, because I listened to KHJ radio here in Los Angeles, right?
I remember.
And they would play the song More Than a Feeling, and of course, you know, me being a little kid at 11 years old, I listened to that and liked it, and went from Boston, and I bought Boston's debut record, saved up my $3.99, went out and bought that album, and my brother goes with me. He buys AEROSMITH'S Toys in the Attic, and we decided that we liked each other's records so much that we actually swapped.
Oh.
So I ended up with AEROSMITH'S Toys in the Attic, and that's probably where it all went south. The same inspiration you got, Mark, because you've talked about this one song over and over again, and it's one of those songs that changed my life. It's Adam's Apple.
Right.
And it was the riff, and then I looked at it, and I was starting to understand band members at this point in time. And I looked at the writing credits, and I realized that the entire song was written by the singer, Steven Tyler.
Right.
Like all the music, all the lyrics, arrangement, everything, that was Steven Tyler. So there was no Joe Perry involved, no Brad Whitford, no Tom or Joey or whatever. It was, and I started realizing, wow, you mean singers can write music? So I was very aware of this early on. And yeah, so that's the takeaway.
Wow, that's a band.
I can answer this by using two bands where the musicianship is subpar. Sorry guys, gotta say it. Two bands that actually had an impact on the world were Kiss and Motley Crue. It has nothing to do with musicianship. It has everything to do with your chemistry and the group of people together and what they create together. With all due respect to both those bands, they're probably not the greatest musicians, but when they got together, those four guys in both bands got together and created, it was absolute magic, and you could tell. And that was a point proven because each one of those bands had lineup changes later on, and while they were still really good, there was something different. So chemistry is everything, and I was always aware of that. You could have a subpar player, a subpar vocalist, for example. You can't have a bad drummer. That's a different story. But if you had some subpar players, but they were bringing in 100%, U2, for example, Bono is probably not a great vocalist. And say what you will about, I don't want to get into his political stance or anything like that, because you'll divide, groups of people.
Good point.
There's no doubt when the guy sings, he's very passionate,
and
and that passion comes through. And that's the thing, the chemistry is everything.
Wow. And
Writer's block, months of it. No, it's funny. You wait for that moment of inspiration, and knock on wood, there's been no writer's block to speak of for the last, say, 15, 16 years or so.
wow.
But there have been times where you have absolutely no ideas, and you sit there for 2 or 3 years at a stretch going, man, I can't think of anything good or anything I like. But something will happen, something will trigger it. It's no secret, I make a joke about transportation here in LA, whether I'm driving, riding a train, whatever it is. Stupid people infuriate me. Infuriation creates that trigger moment where all of a sudden the riff pops in your head. It's never a lyric, it's never a poetic. I feel like writing a story in my journal, it's never that for me. It's always there's a riff, there's something about a guitar riff that pops in my head, and that's where it starts. And if it's good, usually the best thing that ever happened was getting one of these things, because now instead of trying to remember it, immediately I can sing it into my voice recorder. And I can listen to it later and go, is that good? Is that bad? Is that whatever? And then I got to sit down and try and figure out how to play it. Some of them, we've actually, I'm going to, total full disclosure here, Anger is Art has actually recorded songs that are actually impossible to play.
I agree.
But there's going to be something that happens that triggers that moment, and the floodgates open, and all the songs just start flowing. And I can't put my finger really on what it is other than it happens. But I'm envious of people that can actually sit down and force themselves to write songs. I can't do that.
Right. be?
Well, I do recall the most recent record we have, which is our current album, Ad Mortem Festinamus, which I think that was the only time we actually sat down and said, hey, let's tie everything together lyrically. So that every song, I mean, the songs are going to be the songs no matter what they do, but everything kind of following the same theme. And Eric Bryan, our bass player, who has been in the band probably, my God, already 5 years now. It's going to be 5 years next month. I can't believe that much time's gone by. Has been such a blessing to have in the band. He took a hold of that and he started writing a whole bunch of lyrics, which are absolutely fantastic. And a song called, good Christ, Dim Carcosa. I had to think about that for a second, which closes the record out. It was Eric who encapsulated everything and tied it together with the audio track you hear on the way out, which is actually taken from the, what was it, A Night to Remember was the movie about the Titanic sinking. This is the one that was released back in the 1950s. And it was a whole idea of the concept of everything we're hurrying towards death, let us go without sinning, is what it actually translates to. And it's man's stupidity and man's hubris. We go back to a previous record and kind of tie that together. And here's the ultimate symbol of man's, we're absolutely so smart. Look, we have an unsinkable ship. The very first time they take it out, it hits an iceberg and sinks, and people die.
Wow.
It's one of those. So that was conceptual, if you will, lyrically, but kind of tied together in the idea of everything is in such a rush. We're hurrying towards death, and we don't even realize it.
Wow.
It helps knowing the guys for a long, long time. Obviously, I think the longest, given that so many people have passed away, the longest friendship I actually have is with Dan Oliverio, who we actually met in 1982. And it's funny how it happened. I was starting to play with a band called Prisoner, which had the Deandra brothers and a bass player named Randy Krauthammer. And one of the first few rehearsals, we played a couple of shows as a four-piece. I replaced a singer named Gary Giles, or Giles, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And we played a couple of shows as a four-piece. And one day we were at rehearsal, and a couple of people show up. One of them was Dan Oliverio. He shows up, and he sits in our rehearsal room, and he does this thing. And if you know Dan, you know this is what he'll do. He sees a guitar sitting down. He goes over, picks up the guitar, and he starts watching what we're playing, and he starts playing all the songs.
Right.
And I'm looking at this guy. I look over at Joey, the guitar player, and say, hey, Joey, I said, think we should consider getting Danny as a second guitar player? And the rest is history. So we've been playing together since 1982. And that's where it started. So having that history of being able to complete somebody else's sentences, if you will, musically, or know what they're thinking, or know they're going to go down this avenue, and okay, then I got to meet them at this corner, and we got to go back down this avenue, kind of a thing. Chemistry is that. I've been in enough bands where, and this was real bad in the 80s, where it's, hey, so-and-so went to MI, they're a GIT player, or they went to this, or they went to that, and they're into Shred, and they're into Yngwie, and Chris Impellitteri, and Steve Vai, and Joe Satriani, and it's like, where's their soul? What do they play? Where? And it comes back to that chemistry. What do they bring to the table? The guy could be a fantastic player. And do they bring it into this? Does it work? Does it mesh? It's nothing wrong with not getting a gig. It's just you may not be the right person. Then I can get into Rob, who I've known. It's funny. A mutual friend of ours, interviewer and myself, told me about, and I've told this to Rob Alaniz, that I had this preconceived notion of Rob because I was told that Rob hated my guts and thought I was a loser.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And then we were brought together to do a reunion of a certain band, and immediately I clicked with Rob, and we got along just like that. You find people. This is going to sound funny. You find people that are musical soulmates, and Rob is one of those guys. It's funny because it's like if I throw a riff at Rob, Rob will look at this and he'll go, "Oh, why don't you just do this? Why don't you do that?" Rob came in on the Disfigure album. And we had already started demoing songs up and whatever, and the demos kind of weren't going anywhere because there was no chemistry with the previous guys, and that's that's playing into this. And Rob says, "Hey, what if I do this? What if I do that?" He says, "Now Pete Sandoval from Morbid Angel would do this." He says, "I'm going to drop that into the song," and we're just listening, going, "There it is."
Right.
He got it, and also it's the interpersonal thing. You have to get along with these people. If the chemistry's there, but you're butting heads, it's just not going to fly. It was Rob and Dan both came in just about the same time in the end of in 2009, And we still had, for whatever reason, we had a revolving door of bass players. To this day, I'm still the bass player that's played on more Angers Art records than anybody else. And but then Eric, like I said, Eric came in 2013, and he came in and he had just this understanding of, okay, this is what I need to bring to the table, and it's like, it's perfect.
Yeah.
Ron has been, we've worked with some other great producers. We have John Haddad, who we did the two prior albums with, was fantastic. Ron sold himself. So anyway, we get together, Ron and I get together, this is shortly after the Hubris Incorporated album was released. And it was during Christmas break, if I remember, I was off work. Hey, let's get together, go have lunch. So anyway, he says, hey, bring a copy of your Hubris album, I want to listen to it. Okay. So I pop it in, we're driving in his truck, and he says, I guarantee you, listening to whatever song it was, he goes, I guarantee you, you wish you would have done this right here. And subconsciously I'm thinking, he's right. That, you know, maybe you should have done this right here on this section. You would have brought this out more there. He's right. I bet you wish you would have put this song in this order. And I have wrestled with the song order on the Hubris album. It's like I think we didn't put the songs in the right order.
Okay.
I absolutely love the album, but the songs don't run in the right order. But it was the salesmanship. And then after we get done eating, we go back to his studio, and he starts punching up this and that and everything. He starts re-EQing songs. He goes, you should have done it like this, because this brings that out, that brings that out. It's like, damn it!
Right, okay.
So then he starts bringing up other bands that he's recorded. He goes, here's what I wanted to do with them, and here's what they refused to do. And punches. I was like, holy crap, this guy gets it, right? So he says, so what do you have? And what do you have? And I happen to have a couple of ideas on my phone that I just showed you there. And I pulled it out. I said, so I'm going with this. He goes, okay. He says, if you did this and you did that, that would bring. He said, that's exactly what I'm thinking. This is what needs to happen. It just made the most sense. And then we got into price. And it turns out that I don't want to give away too much information, but it was extremely competitive. Let's just say that. And then he made the offer. He says, look, let's find out if we can. There it was. He says, let's find out if we have good chemistry in the studio. He says, bring you guys in. Let me record one song, and let's just see how it goes. There was a song we did on the Callous Inferior record called Race for the War that was, and we chose that song. It's like largely because I remember when we recorded it, it was tough to record because there's a lot of punching in and punching out and all kinds of things. Yes, we don't play things straight through. There was a lot of, this has to be done right, that has to be done. There was a lot of studio trickery in order to make it sound right. So we go in there, and in one afternoon, he gave us a better product than what we had done prior. And we all look at each other and go, okay, as we get ready to go forward, we'll go forward. We do the next record with him, which turned out to be Ad Mortem. As far as input onto songs, Ron can actually come up with some ideas, and I guess he gets the creative bug where he'll actually mix something up for you and send out what his idea would be. And it's either it works or it doesn't work, but he's not afraid to do that. By the same token, if you tell Ron, I'm not digging what we're hearing, he's got no problem with that. He realizes whose product it ultimately is. The guy has an understanding of tone that is unlike most anything. Let me rephrase it. An understanding of tone and frequency, where frequencies need to lie so that nothing steps on one another. And I'm not an audiophile. I don't listen to what I call things that only dogs can hear. I don't really listen to that. I listen to, does the song sound good? What did the band create, and what point were they trying to get across? He's the one that actually picks all that stuff out and separates frequencies, and the guy is fantastic. And one thing I realized early on, because I was playing bass for a long time, playing bass and singing, but one thing I really realized early on is watching guitar players fight to get the tone they want. And I kept hearing all the veteran players say to me, your tone is in your fingers, your tone is in your hands. And so when I made the transition over to playing guitar, I realized it's like everything's already there. You're gonna only be able to manipulate it just a little tiny bit, but your tone is in your fingers. If you've got sausage fingers, like for the most part I do, you're already screwed. Your tone is going to be in your hands. So if you would have put different amps, God, that's a whole different subject altogether. Led Zeppelin 2 was a fantastic guitar tones, but when you realize the history of how it was recorded in so many different studios and so many different amps, but if you don't know that all the way through, the tone was in Jimmy Page's hands.
Right.
And that's the important thing. Page sounds like Page, sounds like Page. I don't use effects. I don't use delay. I don't use a wah-wah pedal. I use a noise gate and a tuner, and that's it. It's because the tone is already there, and you're going to sound like you no matter what you play through.
Your vocals.
I can put it into words because you told me this a long time ago, but I already knew this for vocals. I didn't realize I could transition this to guitar as well. You have to go in with an idea already of what you want. What statement are you trying to make, and how do you get there? So to borrow your quote, and you told me this, and this is, I've applied this to so many things. You told me this probably 12, 13 years ago. It says, start in the middle. And then you got to figure out your intro and your outro. But start in the middle. What are you saying? Start in the middle of the story, and then go back, and then go forward. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But that's it. The vocal, I see so many singers. I'm not going to mention any names because honestly I can't think of any at the moment. But they just open their mouth and whatever comes out is what they get. And then they think that the studio is going to fix it. No, you can't do that. You need to know exactly what you are. And a lot of bands of our style don't like using harmonies of any kind. I don't necessarily want to call them harmonies. I call them flavorings or icing on cake or things of that nature. Because you still need to get that point across, and you need to get out of your head what you hear so that everybody hears it. How do I approach it? It's got to be good. And you've also, as a singer, you've also got to know what you are. For years and years, and this goes way back to when we were playing together back in the early Abattoir days, I loved Ronnie James Dio. Who doesn't, right? There's the big three. There's Dio, Halford, and Dickinson. And of course, well, I'm just as good as them until I realized I'm not that. I'm not that kind of a singer. And I didn't learn this until later, much, much later. And I really wish I would have known this beforehand. And I learned it in the 90s. Specifically, I learned a lot from watching basketball. I learned it specifically in the 1995 NBA Finals. If you recall, that was the Houston Rockets versus the Orlando Magic.
Okay.
Now, and people are going, he's going to talk about basketball. Yes, I am. Because all this time, I thought I was an Akeem Olajuwon type singer, but it turns out I'm Shaquille O'Neal.
Oh,
and I don't have the finesse. Akeem is amazing, was amazing, you know.
Yeah.
Both of those guys were fantastic. Hard to talk about him in past tense, but
yeah.
Akeem was graceful. He was absolutely graceful, and he'd slice everybody. I mean, he was slicing Shaq up.
Yeah.
Shaq hadn't figured the game out yet. But Shaq was all power. And I realized I'm more Shaq. It's all power. I've got to bludgeon people with my voice. I can't finesse them. I'm not Ronnie James Dio. I'm not this lilting, high-pitched, singy type guy. I've got to rip people to shreds with the power, and the power's in the middle. Right. Occasionally you go up, occasionally you go low, but everything is right here. And I listened back to Vicious Attack. I listened back to the Bloodlust recordings, or even the Prisoner recordings, which I've come across just recently. And I think, what the hell was I doing? I didn't know what I was doing. That Abattoir record that people love, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just opening my mouth and singing. And if I could take that Steve Gaines into the studio and say, you're not going to be able to live with this. You know, you need to think this, you need to think that. I wonder if the young guy would have listened. I probably wouldn't have, because I had all the answers then.
Inger's Art.
The most pivotal, important record in my life. It probably did not have the greatest impact. Well, actually it did, and I'll tell you why. I had spent so many years playing in bands, playing in different bands, where I had people literally get on the phone with me or get right in my face. You don't know what the hell you're doing. You've got no ideas. You don't know what's going on. So there was a period right before that album came out that I was playing in 5 bands at once, and all 5 bands collapsed. The common denominator in all of those bands was me. And I'm realizing every last band I had failed right at this point in time. Maybe it's time to hang it up, so I'm just going to record these songs that I have and throw them out there. I'm just going to put it out under the Anger is Art name. And it's kind of like what Dave Grohl did with Foo Fighters. You know, this is right after Kurt killed himself in Nirvana, and he just puts it out and doesn't put his name on it. Let's see what happens. And people responded, but people did respond. And this is amazing. And I remember reaching out to a bunch of guitar players. This was pivotal. I reached out to a bunch of guitar players and said, look, I played everything on this. I programmed a drum. Yes, it's a drum machine. I programmed a drum machine, and I played all the instruments. I just need solos. And every one of these lead guitar players said, well, you need to change this song here and change this song, and you got to do this and you do that. I said, fuck it, I'm going to play guitar. So immediately this gets out. People hear it, and this is fantastic. Who is this? And, oh, it's the Abattoir guy. He said, oh, well, he must have learned all this from so-and-so person, because there's no way he could, nope, he's not involved. You must have, so-and-so must have, nope, they're not involved, it was just me. It was pivotal in that respect, because all these people that were trying to push me down, and I can name names, I'm not going to name names, these people that were trying to stomp me down suddenly had to go away because they had nothing to stand on anymore. It's like, shit, he did that record. There were some people that actively tried to shut me down completely. It's like, no, fuck this guy, don't listen to this record, don't listen to this, don't. And people did. I expected just to put out a demo and say, okay, I'm done playing music. And Mars Castro, who played drums in both Dreams Damnation and Pagan War Machine, he reaches out to me and he goes, hey dude, he says, you're getting a lot of response, let's put a band together. And if I never would have done that record, we wouldn't be doing this interview today. It was so impactful.
Amazing.
Callous and Fuhrer, let's go back to the chemistry issue. Some of the guys that were in that first lineup, fantastic players and great guys, but we were butting heads musically. We were pulling different directions. And having been in, like I said, some of those bands where it's like, no, you can't have any ideas because you're only the bass player, or you're only the singer, or you're only this, or you're only that. You can't bring any ideas to the table. I wasn't going to do anything to that, like that to these guys. And some of the ideas were fantastic that other guys brought in. Some of them may have been a little experimental. And the experimental probably derailed us a little bit, because that was the one record where we had a lot of hype going into it, a lot of promo. And there was some different styles there. And while they were very good, it's just that's not necessarily what Anger's art was going to be. And when it came, this affected the following record, but we'll get into that in a second. But chemistry has to be the same, and the chemistry was not.
Figure.
Disfigure was the greatest record I've ever done in my life. And it, like I said, Callous and Fuhrer was going to affect Disfigure. When it came time to start working on the Disfigure records, the guys who were in the band prior really wanted to go in a more progressive direction. Mars had left. He had some reasons to leave, and I back him to this day. I back him 110%. The guy, we're tight like that. Anybody that knows Mars knows that.
Yeah.
What kind of a guy he is. But we started getting some ideas. Like, I want to steer this back towards what initially I envisioned this, and I'll bring some ideas in. But a lot of the songs were starting to go out in left field. I knew we were in trouble the very last show that the Callous, it's not even the Callous lineup at that point, because we had changed drummer and changed bass player. And what had happened was some of the ideas that the drummer and guitar player were bringing in, which while they were still very good, they were so out in left field. And I overheard a conversation at the last show we had. Yeah, we need to do this. We need to tell him we need to do this. Tell me to do what? Oh, nothing. And it's like, we're in trouble. I looked over at the bass player, Angelo, at the time. I said, I think we're in trouble. So he and I start crafting songs, and we just started butting heads to the point where we'd show up and argue. And one day it's like, go, be gone. And that was right at the time that Kismet, it's right at the time that Abattoir was doing that European tour.
Okay.
And as a result of that, that's where I got to know Rob. And of course, we go back to having known Dan for almost 30 years prior to that, at that point in time. And Mark, we had a different guitar player on that tour.
Right. You're right.
Okay. So my conscience is clear with regards to how that guitar player was selected. I said, look, this is when Juan decided, when one guitar player was not going to do the tour.
Right.
And it's like, well, look, okay, here's the fact. It's got to be as close to the real thing as possible. Dan Oliverio gets first crack at this, whether he wants it or whether he chooses to do so or not. He has to be the first person we ask. I walk into rehearsal one day and there's another guitar player in there. The guy was good, but the chemistry was absolutely wrong. And it should have been Dan.
Right.
Okay, so anyway, short story long, we realized as we're getting ready for this tour that, okay, we're going to do this tour, and okay, everybody knows the guy's name. Tim was not going to be so much a member of the band so much as he was special guesting, which he did. But towards the warm-up shows and stuff like that, it's like all of a sudden it's like, hey, let's get Dan to come in and play some songs. I had no idea that somebody had reached out to Dan. I walk into rehearsal one day, and here's Dan in the Abattoir rehearsal room. It's like I walk in the door, open the door, and there he is. I've got it on video someplace. I've actually posted it where I'm walking in. I'm going to get everybody on camera here as I walk in the door. And he, what the fuck are you doing here? He goes, oh, Mel asked me to come down and play. So sure enough, there he is playing, and there's a microphone in front of him. He's playing guitar and singing. And this is different. Here's another topic. about other members singing, we should get into. But there he was playing, and I watched him play. It's like, yes, he has been playing, and there's Rob in the background with the light bulbs going off. It's like, okay, get through this tour, let's find out what happens. And the rest is history. So we get in to do this Disfigure with all of that tension that was going on, and the album was an absolute explosion. It was a 10-song record. Every song was right in the same vein, and it was punishing. It was absolutely brutal. And as we were doing this record, I was like, oh, this one was going to be and that was the absolutely, each Angry Heart album was received very well. This is the one where people said, you finally have your masterpiece. And it's like, I realized it's like, okay, this is what the band needs to be, and thus far, it's kind of like Slayer doing Rain and Blood. You know?
Right.
Now we're trying to find another Rain and Blood. What's next? Well, I'm pretty sure people know that we're in the process of finishing up a live album, but the problem is we need to get into the studio and record some bonus tracks to go with it. We can release the album title right now, and actually Dan Oliverio come up with the album title. He listened back to the recordings and, man, we're playing fast as fuck. And we kind of stuck with it because I think we played everything at a higher tempo than we actually recorded in the studio versions. So that's next. We're also like in the point where we're putting songs together. I guess you could call it pre-production for what would be the next studio album. 7th album total, 6th studio album total.
Wow.
And a few shows here and again, but I think we're at a point right now where we just want to continue doing the creative process, and the shows will come. I keep hearing offers of different things, but I'm not so anxious to go chase them all the time because you waste a lot of energy chasing shows, and let's have the real thing happen. There's a bunch. There are a bunch. I think you can get really into more about the style that floats my boat versus the guitar player that floats my boat. I know there's a lot of guys that go nuts about, what's his name, Joe Vai or Steve Satriani, you know, the Ibanez kids, and Yngwie or whomever else. I don't care much for that kind of stuff. I don't care for a lot of shred and tricks. It really ends up becoming, I can borrow a quote, it's actually Gene Simmons, I'll make it a little bit better. It's like listening to a typist type, and they're doing 85 words a minute, and they're typing as many keystrokes as they can, but they're not really writing anything. They're not writing a story of any kind. It's just, wow, your typing skills are good with no errors whatsoever.
Right.
No, what are you talking about? There's guys like B.B. King, rest in peace, who could hold one note, and he could say more than most of these guys could, and you could feel what he was doing. Here in LA, there are players like, well, the two big ones were always Ever Van Halen and Randy Rhoads, and I think both of them are and were phenomenal, but the thing is that I listen to those guys play rhythm guitar, and I routinely, when people get into the Eddie Van Halen topic, I routinely say, does anybody pay attention to how well that guy plays rhythm guitar? Huh? He does? If you listen to the isolated tracks and you listen to his rhythm guitar tracks, how spot on accurate they are. His right hand strength, a combination of that and the palm muting and the chords he chooses. And same thing with Randy. The best example I can give you is the live version with Randy Rhoads playing of Iron Man. Where you think about the Black Sabbath version, and Tony Iommi is one of my heroes. I mean, there's a guy who didn't use a lot of notes, but he sure got the emotions out. But the difference between Tony Iommi with the 2-finger bar chord versus Randy with dropping the bass note and the way they play the da 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 is, I love both of them equally. But it was all about rhythm guitar for me, as opposed to lead guitar. The one guy who really encapsulated it all for me and was and is still Glenn Tipton from Judas Priest, and it was a combination of, the guy could play, he could do all the guitar solo tricks. The guy was he's not dead yet, a fantastic lead guitar player, but the one thing he could do is he could phrase, and I'm going to steer that back to the guys that had a direct influence on me, and the guys who influenced me more than anybody else were guys that I actually ended up playing with, and I can name 4 of them. One of them, of course, was Earl Mendenhall from Bloodlust. Earl, as a rhythm guitar player, had this command of chords and had this command of right-hand picking, strength on the right hand picking, the palm mute. It was fantastic. solid lead guitar player, certainly above average. He always knocked himself down because he wasn't a shred guy. It didn't matter because he played rhythm guitar so well. Another one is, well, there's a guy who I'm doing an interview with right now, who, you should walk out in front, Mark. And I'm not just saying that because you're here, but the fact remains is like all of us, long before I started working with Abattoir, it was like, wow, look at what Mark does. But you had this knack for understanding how to place chords. You have this understanding, and I learned this from you because you and I sat down and talked. I think we talked about this earlier in the interview, where you talk about what do you want to say with a solo. And Mark, you can play a billion notes. You've always had that ability to play a billion notes, but you always knew exactly when to phrase. A lot of guys don't know how to phrase, and that's everything. You could say more with 3 or 4 notes, and I go back to B.B. King, for example. I was never really impressed with the guys that could just do a million notes for no reason. It's like, tell me a story, talk to me, make it as important as the lyrics. Two other guys. I got to work with Jim Durkin from Dark Angel. Of course, we played together in both Dreams, Damnation, and Pagan War Machine. And Jim was largely responsible. I was always a decent enough guitar player to play what I wrote, but I never thought that I was good enough. And it just kind of came on as a goof how I transferred into guitar. It was like, here, sit in with us. Because I sat in one day with them in a Dreams, Damnation rehearsal, because I was always there, and it graduated into, here, play with us live. But Jim was the guy who, while he's a fantastic lead guitar player, he concentrated so much on rhythm. He's the guy that would walk up to me as I'm playing guitar. He would take his hand and press it. He goes, palm mute, palm mute. He says, you don't want to hear those strings ring. You want to feel the percussiveness, and you want to feel the bass of that picking. So immediately I start pressing down hard, and tone changed everything. That was the best lesson I could possibly have. It had nothing to do with playing lead guitar. It had everything to do with where you put your the meat of your right hand.
Right.
And
that's good stuff. So
that was, you know, huge in turning me into a guitar player. And then the other one who goes without saying is also Karen. We played together in Tactics for many years, and he was so humble, always such a humble guy. He came into the band with the other guitar player at the time, like he was going to be the lead guitar player and Sin was going to play rhythm. So he was a fantastic guitar player. That guy didn't work out, and in the meantime I knew that was a mistake immediately because I watched him solo. It's like, okay, this guy can really play. He has that same thing. He knows how to phrase solos so well. But he's got that right hand strength. It's funny, Sin has sat in with us a couple of times in Anger's Art shows. And Dan and I make the joke all the time about, oh gosh man, we got to play this, we got to lock this in, whatever. He sits down to play, I forget what song it was. I want to say it was The Crush, if I'm not mistaken. And okay, does it go like this? And I've got it on video somewhere. And because I set up a video camera just to record the moment. And I watched him play the song, and it's like, holy crap, why couldn't he have done a rhythm tracks on the record?
Wow.
But you see, what it comes down to is mostly the understanding of what to play and when to play it. And those were the guys that had the biggest influence on me. So the 4 biggest were actually guys that have names all around the world. But I was able to write and record songs with them, tour with them. That was huge. And how's that for guitar influences?
Amazing.
But it's not so much really about the band, it's about the songs that they write, how they present them. And I always try and like gauge honesty. I was trying to look like, why are they doing this here? There's a lot of bands that you can tell they're in it because they want to be famous and get rich. You're not going to get rich doing music anymore. It's just not there. But it has everything to do with the honesty of why they're doing it. I mean, are they doing it because they think they should, because people pat them on the back and tell them they're great? Or is it because they've got some kind of an internal drive that says, I've got to do this. If I don't do this, I'm going to explode. And you see that every now and again. I see that with there's a lot of good young bands that I've seen from all around the world. They're fantastic, but there's too many to mention, but there's also too many that I look at and I think, why are they doing this? And it's harsh to say because I'm not saying I'm any better than them, but I think everybody really needs to look in a mirror every day when they're doing music and think, why am I doing this? What reason? What's the motivation? And is it pure? And that's something that influences me. He didn't waste any opportunities. He didn't waste time.
Awesome.
Early on, I wasted a lot of time, and a lot of time waiting on others. And you start to realize, and here's the thing, I'm going to say it, I'm 53 years old right now as we do this interview. We see a lot of people that are in our age group who got a lot of them passed on just in the last couple of weeks, in fact. There's only so many spins on this blue marble. There's only so much time we all have together. And there's only so much time you have to do this. I'll revert back to a story that I've told since forever. My mom passed away in '99. I think we talked about this earlier. I'm not sure, but I'll revert to it again. She talked about all the time she wasted doing things that didn't matter. And she never got a chance to do what she wanted to do. And I've used that for the last 19 years as motivation. It's like, you don't have that. You don't know when it's going to stop. Just, I would like people, if it all ends tomorrow, like people to say, okay, he did it from an honest place, and I should have spent more money on him. Just, yeah, I can't really name any one person, but I'm going to use this as a broad statement. Thank you to everybody. Just, thanks for listening. Thanks for giving it your time to listen. In many instances, thanks for giving it a second or third chance. I hope that the time, say a song is 3.5 minutes long, I hope that 3.5 minutes wasn't wasted time. I hope it was fulfilling. Every now and again, you come across people that say, you changed my life, and it's, how in the heck could I change my life? I'm just some guy sitting on some rocks in the river in the city border between Azusa and Doherty. But thank you for that. Thank you for entrusting me with that. And as the time we got left doing this, I hope I do not let you down.
Awesome.
So that's really it.
That's awesome. Thanks so much for your time, Steve.
Oh,
Appreciate
thank you. Thank
All
you.
right.
And thank you. Mark, thanks for doing this. Thanks for being more than anything else, forget being bandmates. Thanks for being a great friend.
Awesome.
That's what's most important. At the end of the day, I mean, you can stop playing. I'm watching Glenn Tipton, for example, who's losing his skills. At the end of the day, you still have your friends, and that's in your family, your community, and that's what matters.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yes.